So there's one story from my life that I would categorize as a ghost story or scary story. And it goes like this. Years back, I used to write for a newspaper. And one Halloween, my assignment was to go hang out with and talk to this family who ran a ghost seeking business. Like they had another business on the side, but in their off time, they ran a free ghost seeking service. Um, and so I went and talked to them, and kind of got their story, and turns out they'd had a lot of like paranormal experiences, or what they would call that, and they through that kind of got interested in sort of doing these ghost seekings, and so they said that in a few days they were going to go do a ghost seeking at this place in San Antonio. The paper was in San Antonio too. That used to be a church and had become a theater and maybe a cafe, and it still exists and it's still supposed to be haunted, but that's where they were going, and they were like, "Hey, you should come along." And I was like, "Okay." And so I went back and I called the place and I was like, "So what's the deal? You guys are haunted?" I wanted to get some background. They were like, "Yeah," and the lady was like, "Yeah, yeah, like we're totally haunted." And I was like, "Okay." She's like very nonchalant about it. She's like, "Yeah, there's like a lady like." Sometimes I'm like cleaning the like theater area and I look up in the balcony and she's there. She used to be an actress apparently. I was like, okay. And she mentioned a couple other, like there's a male presence and then maybe like a couple. And then she said there was a kid who like when she was cleaning the kitchen, he would like turn off the lights or like shove her into the freezer, which to me would be a matter for concern. But she was like, "Oh yeah, like it happens," and I'll just be like, "Hey Eddie, I'm having kind of a rough day. Can you knock it off? Leave me alone for a little bit." And she said he would. So apparently they had worked out some kind of symbiotic or peaceable living arrangement, which is cool, I guess. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I went and I met the people there at the day, and it was me and the family, and the family was like a mother, two sons, a younger daughter, and kind of like a rotating uh, number of people who would help them like as volunteers. So for like 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and then me, and then a guy who worked at the place. And so I was like, okay, so how does this work? And she's like, well, we'll wait till it gets dark, then we'll go in, and then we'll sit somewhere, and I'll say if there's anything that would like to make contact, or anyone who'd like to make contact, please give us a sign. And they had like cameras and like audio equipment and like e electromagnetic pulse reader things. I was like, okay. So we go in after it gets dark, and they shut off all the lights. So there we are, sitting in this supposedly haunted place, um, with the lights off, about to ask things to make contact with us. And I was like, "So what are we looking for?" And she's like, I mean, like noises or voices or smells or stuff like that." And she's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "All those things." And she's like, "Smells, perfumes sometimes accompany visitations. I don't know what you would call them." And just anything out of the ordinary. She was like, I was like, okay. And so the lights are off, and she, sure enough, goes, if there's anyone or anything who'd like to make contact, please give us a sign. And like immediately, almost immediately, right away, I start smelling this fragrance, like this kind of flowery sort of, like not natural flower, like not fresh flowers, but kind of, I mean, like a perfume. And I'm sitting there, and like no one else seems to be noticing it, and I'm just like, and I'm like, this will not do. I'm the reporter. I'm supposed to be the skeptic. I can't write this story if I'm like, and then we were there, and there was a smell, and it was weird, um, because it's I'm supposed to be the voice of quote unquote reason. Now, I'm not saying that that I don't believe. I don't know what I believe, but whatever. That's my job. I feel, or I felt in that moment, was to kind of be like, you know, sort of the reasonable doubt guy. And so I'm sitting there and I'm smelling this perfume and I'm looking around and I'm the only one and I'm just kind of like, this is. And finally, I just kind of I have to kind of give in and go. I go to the mother. I go, hey, are you wearing a perfume? And she's like, no. And I'm like, she's like, why? And I'm like, and she's like, oh my gosh. And she goes to the son and says, do you smell that? And he's like, I think that's a normal smell. And I'm in my head, I'm like, nope, that's not a normal smell. That is a perfume, and it was not here a few seconds ago, and it is definitely here now. And so we're all sitting there going, and the guy who works there, like who's sitting like a table away, notices that we're kind of, and he's like, what's going on? And we're like, we smell, I guess, do you smell that? Do you smell like a perfume? And he goes, oh, that's the air freshener. It's on a timer. It's automatic. And so I'm like, oh, okay, haha, like, joke's on me. And so we keep going, and the night kind of progresses without incident. Like, we go and sit in places and, like, set up stuff and try to, she tries to commune with stuff. And, I mean, I don't know. I was raised Catholic. I don't know why I was okay with this stuff, but I was like, it's for the story, so whatever. So it goes on, and that's it. And like that's pretty much all that happens throughout the night. I mean, it's a good time, and they're really nice people. But that's it. And so I go, okay, cool. Like, thank you very much. And they go, well, it's not over. Like, we're gonna gather all this evidence and like, analyze it, and we'll call you in a couple days. And I'm like, okay. So I go back to the office, and they're like, how'd it go? And I'm like, oh, whatever. Like, it was good. I mean, it was like fun. This thing happened with the air freshener, and they're like, ha ha ha. And I'm like, yeah. Um, And then, but I mean, I'm just kind of going like, oh, okay, what story am I going to write? And then 2 days later, about that, they call me back and they go, hey, we found some stuff. Come check it out. And I'm like, okay. So I go over, and the first thing they show me are these like digital photos of like orbs. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those like ghost seeking programs where they have these things like they're like kind of like balls of light, sort of. And some people are like, oh, it's spectral something, and other people are like, that's light glinting off dust particles anyway. So I'm just kind of like, but apparently they're pretty common. Like you take pictures in a place, you'll probably get those things. And so some people again would be like, that's because there's paranormal activity everywhere, and other people are like, it's a light trick. Anyway, so they show me those things, and I'm like, okay, cool, all right, yeah. What else is there? And they're like, um, and then they show me this video where I think it's us kind of sitting in that kind of area where where we had the air freshener thing, and in the corner, I think there's like more than one video of this sort of thing. There's like a little like light that kind of goes like that appears and goes and kind of moves across and then just disappears, and I mean it's really quick. I mean I know that sounds weird, but looking at it, I was like, okay. I mean, I don't know what that is, but that was so quick that I mean, I don't know. I can't say conclusively, obviously, that is some kind of, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, okay, I mean, sure. I have no idea, but that's not the most stunning thing I've ever seen. Like I'm some sort of spectral evidence snob or whatever. Um, but and so they go, cool. And I'm like, all right. And then they go, and then there's these. And they show me these two video clips. And in one of them, uh, I'm in it. And we were walking up some stairs at that point on the night of the thing, and they were videoing it. And there's a a girl, like a young lady next to me, and we're walking up, and she asked me a question, and I say something, and on the video, and I say something like, yeah, 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 something. And then I ask her a question, and she goes, I don't know. And then, very clearly, to my ears, on the tape, there is what sounds uncannily like a human voice, whispered, saying something like, I know. Like, I know, right? So I'm like, that's strange. And strange that it would come right at that point when I asked her a question and she said, I don't know. And then this voice goes, I know. Weird. And there's another video that has another kind of voice that, like, I can't tell what it's saying. One of the guys says, like, kind of contends that it's the words "Dear Lord," but I don't know. But it definitely to me sounds like a voice as well. And so they're like, right, and I'm like, that is strange. I don't know. Um, and I go, wow, well, cool, thanks very much, and I leave. And this whole time though, I mean, I'm like, wow, that was interesting. I certainly can't account for that, but at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, they've had this stuff for 2 days, right? Not that they would, but I mean, I just again like as this sort of like um, reasonable doubt guy, I have to kind of go like, well, these are the possible explanations. And and I asked him, and I was like, yeah, you guys obviously didn't doctor anything. And they're like, no, no, absolutely not. I'm like, okay, cool. And I mean, I believe him. Or I mean, I'm just kind of like, yeah, totally, right? But I just have to leave avenues open, I guess. So I'm driving back, and I'm like, okay, so like, I went on this thing, and now there are these voices that I don't know where they came from. And I'm like, okay, so I could write this thing, and we've got and I can kind of make it a like pseudo, hopefully, God willing, entertaining story. Um, but I'm like, but this evidence, they had it in their possession, so that's kind of like puts a little damper on the story. And as I'm driving, all of a sudden, I realize that the entire time pretty much always carried this around. I had a digital recorder in my pocket, running the whole time, that has not been out of my possession. Uh, that I mean, like as I'm driving, and I realize this is in my bag. And so I stop the car, pull over, rifle through the bag, pull it out, fast forward to the spot, and the voices are there in those two spots. So I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know what that means. I didn't know then. I don't know now. But I've got these two disembodied voices that are kind of like double confirmed, right? Because like obviously they couldn't have done anything to my voice recorders in my pocket. If someone had leaned down and whispered something at my thigh level, I might have noticed. So anyway, that's it. And it's not like, there's no floating candlesticks or anything, but it was kind of like well, what? I don't know what that means. So it's the one thing the one experience I've had that I know of that I would consider in that realm, in that category. Realm is a scary word of things, I guess. So that's it. Happy Halloween.